All right. Thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in to this session. Today, we're going to be talking about the current state of the DACA program. And specifically, we're going to do two things. Talk about what your institution can do to support individuals with DACA. And then also the information that we are going to be sharing with our scholars. We are going to have a session next week. And so we wanted to make sure to give this information to you all so that you all can be on the same page as us. And because we know that the students are going to be going to you for support and help during this turbulent time and this time of a lot of anxiety, unknowns, and potentially many people within the next months or year losing their DACA benefits and protections. So today we are really going to be focusing on that. And I think it's really key that we acknowledge, and I'm going to share my screen now. That we acknowledge that today, many of the individuals that are in our colleges and universities are no longer documented. Many of the individuals are completely undocumented. There is a new statistics that shows that there are about 100,000 young people that are graduating from high school now every year. And majority of them, because either the program was halted last year or they no longer fit within the criteria, are eligible for the DACA program. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that, but at the same time say that for the purposes of what we're going to be talking today, we're only going to be talking about individuals with DACA. So can you all see the screen? What are you seeing the presentation? Yes. Okay, I just want to make sure that you're seeing the full. Okay. Oh, you're seeing the notes too. Let me see how show. Second. Well, it's okay if you see my notes, I think, as long as you can see what I'm sharing, the information. Okay. Sharing again, just want to make sure. Okay. So, like I said, today we're going to talk about the background on the litigation, what are the possible outcomes, what colleges and universities can do, and then the key messages to scholars that we're going to be driving, and as well tips on how to prepare for life after DACA. So a little bit of background. As all of you know, June 15th, 2012, so 10 years ago now, President Obama announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. And that program did two things. It allowed for certain individuals, and there was about 800,000 that benefited from this. What it did is that it protected them from deportation and at the same time allowed them to apply for work authorization 2 years at a time. So this was a game changer. We know that this has been one of the most successful immigration programs that has been implemented in the last 30 years. And it completely changed the lives of the individuals that were able to obtain this program, as well as their communities. And one of the most surprising things is that 99% of all DACA individuals have gone and graduated from high school or received the GED. And statistics say that it's about 42% that have gone to college. I think it's higher, but because we don't necessarily track the entrance and attendance of undocumented students in our institutions, we don't really know. But that is a huge number of people that we know were able to get the opportunities to get driver's licenses, be able to get jobs, be able to get IDs, and do a whole bunch of things. So the program was moving along, and there was this stipulation that this program was supposed to be temporary, that there was supposed to be some sort of immigration reform, some sort of legislation that would have made the individuals that had DACA and others, undocumented people, legal with permanent protections. Unfortunately, none of that has happened, but the program has existed. And during the Trump administration, a couple of things started happening. One, the Trump administration tried to end the program, and there were some lawsuits that came about that also tried to end the program. And so 6 years after the initial announcement of the DACA program, there were 7 states led by Texas that filed a lawsuit. This is Texas v. United States in the United States District Court of the Southern District of Texas, challenging the DACA program and saying that the DACA program was causing injury to the state, meaning that that there was individuals that were either using social services or because people were able to get work authorization, were taking the jobs of other US citizens. And they also deemed that the program was unlawful and that the president didn't have the power to do this. So in May 2018, that goes to the courts. And there's a lot that happens in between. The program actually does go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has a tied decision, but they didn't look at the specifics of is the program legal. They just looked at if President Trump, when he tried to end the program, if he did it the right way. And there was no decision made because there was a tied decision. And so the DACA program got to live on. But unfortunately, this Texas lawsuit has continued. And last year, Judge Hainan received this lawsuit, and he gave a ruling that practically said that the DACA program was unlawful. What happened then is that individuals that had applied for the first time to receive this prosecutorial discretion or this program, DACA, were actually denied their ability for their application to be processed. So there are about 77,000 individuals that submitted applications, but that got paused. The good thing is that Judge Hainan, like the Supreme Court in the case in 2020, did say, well, there are people that are relying on this and have had this program for a long time. So I'm going to allow for these individuals to continue to renew their DACA program, but no new applications can be accepted or processed at this time. And so there was, of course, appeals. And just a couple of weeks ago, on July 6th, the Fifth Circuit, a 3-judge panel, heard oral arguments in New Orleans on this. So right now, we are in a waiting period, and there are many different possible outcomes. Unfortunately, nobody really knows a timeline of when we are going to get a decision from these judges. And we also don't know what they're going to tell us, right? The good news is that there is some reliance that have been, people have been able to make the case that, people rely on this DACA program. But at the same time, this is a very conservative court. And so right now, these are the possible outcomes. So from least likely rule, it could be that they rule that Texas and other states have no injury and therefore cannot bring the suit to federal court. So it gets sent back to the judge. Rules that Judge Hainan's decision was premature and order for him to conduct a full trial before deciding the legality of this program. So In essence, what they would do is that they would have a trial and they would try to show, Texas would have to show that there is injury, that there is issues with the program, and that it's causing either for people to lose their jobs, US citizens, because DACA indented individuals are taking jobs, or that DACA individuals are using social services, and et cetera. So Texas has not been able to prove that to this point. And so that's what the folks that are arguing against Texas are saying. And that's one of the outcomes that they're hoping for. But that would only give us maybe 6 more months before all of this would go and continue to move forward in their trials. The other thing that can happen is that the judges affirm Judge Hannon's decision that DACA is unlawful, and it moves on to the next phase, which is all of these have a next phase, but they all lead to the Supreme Court. And then the other potential thing that could happen is that there's a ruling that Judge Hannon's decision stands, and they require for the DACA program to end immediately. So what can happen after that is that even if the Fifth Circuit rules that DACA is unlawful, it won't necessarily order an immediate end to the DACA program, though that is a possibility. And so what does that mean, right? So as I was saying, ending DACA abruptly would be disruptive to DACA recipients as well as to their families, employers, and communities. And so we are hopeful that they take that into account. But if they rule that, right, it could mean that individuals lose their DACA protection right away. But the more likely outcome is that they do say that this program is not legal, and they allow for people to continue to have their renewal of their DACA or their DACA until a specific expiration date. So this is why it's really messy, and why I think it's really important that we're having these discussions and conversations, because there's going to be, or there already is so much anxiety around, what potentially can happen. And it's really difficult for people to live their lives understanding and knowing that this program that has been part of their lives for some of them 10 years could potentially end. So I just wanted to make sure that, I shared and gave you this information so that you understand the gravity of, what could potentially happen. So what can colleges and universities do? A lot. And the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration has put together a really good comprehensive list. And I'm going to share this presentation and as well as the recording with everyone. You'll be able to get this in the PC Weekly. And one of the things that I did for purposes of our conversation today is that I identified what I've called the 4 pillars of support. And so I believe that colleges and universities should be looking at these 4 things to do to support their DACA students. So there should be a communications aspect of it, looking at policies and procedures. There is holistic supports that also are crucial and important. And then thinking about career supports and pathways for students after they graduate. On the communications piece, here's the one of the most important ones. And so it's really important to start working on a rapid response plan that includes a communications plan, including messaging, outreach to the students, and public statements. So making sure that you already have something in the works so that you're not caught off guard, because again, nobody really knows when a decision is going to come down and what the decision is going to be. Of course, as soon as something comes out, we are going to provide all of you with that information. We'll send you, if we have either talking points or just things that you can use to inform the public, but as well as your students. But it's really key that the institutions already start planning, because we know that something is going to happen. The other thing that is going to be really important is to make sure that whatever statements you are making are visible to your DACA students, so that they understand and know that you have their backs and that you are public about having their backs. And then the other thing is that it's really important that you start looking at the language and how you talk about undocumented students overall, because it's going to get really confusing, especially because there could be individuals that are completely undocumented and don't have DACA, or people that have DACA and undocumented. And so making sure that your language are specific to the population of students that you're working with, and that you start moving away from identifying people with DACA, because the program, as we know it, is probably going to be ending in the next couple of years, max. It could be, sooner. So on the policies and procedures, one of the things that I wanted to make sure to share with you is the Higher Immigration Portal. And I'll tell you a little bit about, the Higher Immigration Portal and what information is on there. But it's really important that you understand and you know your own state policies as they relate to eligibility for undocumented students on in-state tuition, state financial aid, scholarships, professional and occupational licensure, state IDs, and driver's licenses. Why is that important? Well, there are some states, not all of them, but there is a small number of states that DACA is tied to a lot of different things like in-state tuition or professional or occupational licensures. The good news is that majority of our states have in-state tuition policies that were implemented before the DACA program was put in place, and therefore that won't be a disruption. So in-state tuition, for example, for undocumented students in the state of Texas or California or New York has nothing to do with their DACA status. And okay, so the other thing is that it's really important for your institutions to understand how FERPA laws protect the information of undocumented students, so that not only can you all assert your rights, but also give comfort to students that they should know that there are laws that protect colleges and universities and the students' information from being shared. So that's one of the key things also that is going to be important. And then the other thing is to audit your admissions process to make sure that you are not collecting unnecessary information, or that it's being too burdensome for this community of people, or exclusionary of undocumented students. So that if a DACA person was to lose their DACA status, that they don't feel that because they've lost DACA status, that means that they won't be able to go to college anymore. And when you receive this presentation, this here, the Higher Immigration Portal is hyperlinked, but Candy, I saw also shared in the chat, the higher education. And I'm actually I want to share with you really quickly the page. Let's see, second. Okay, so this is the higher education portal. And the great thing about this portal is that you can navigate to where it says states, and you'll see a map of the United States. It's color coordinated, but practically what you can do is click on the state, and you can click learn more, and it's going to give you taking a second, but it's going to give you a breakdown of number of students, and it's going to say it has comprehensive access. So it's loading. Second. All right. So it starts with some state data, undocumented students in higher education, international students, all immigrant residents in Texas. And here's what I wanted to show you. So it gives you information on the in-state tuition and state financial aid, access and affordability. It also gives you information if there are any workforce entry eligibility, professional licensures information, and then driver's license. It breaks it down and it has all the bills, information, etc. And you can see there all these different resources. So this is a great tool to be able to just study and look at to make sure that you understand and know what is happening in your states. Okay, so back to the presentation. All right, so the other thing that is going to be important as one of the pillars is the holistic supports. And this is where we're going to really lean on all of you to support the students the way that you are going to be able to do it, and the way that we'll be able to support our scholars, but they really are going to go to you because these supports are one, they need to be one-on-one. So for example, the mental health support, one of the things that we have heard from our scholars is that when they have gone to counseling offices and centers, that many of the individuals that they talk to don't quite understand the issue of immigration and the situation that the student is in. And so it's really important that at these centers, that they're providing culturally competent information to the students, and that the person understands and knows what's happening, because a lot for our students centers around immigration and their status and their worries and anxieties and depression and stuff come from their actual immigration status and what is happening there. But one of the things that we have seen is that, for example, the recent, or not so recent, but the CARES Act and what the funding that came for that for the institutions of higher education at the beginning were not allotted for individuals with DACA, but then when the Biden administration came in, there was changes that were made, and so funds were made available and opportunities were made available for DACA students. So making sure that you understand and know the opportunities there is going to be really important. One of the things that for holistic support is that it's important to establish and direct students to sites where information is available, and putting that very front and center for them on your institutional websites or wherever it is that you send your students to. And expand and continue to provide legal representation and screenings. And you'll see in a little bit why that's going to be key. But we know that, for example, CUNY has a really strong program for legal representation, but sometimes students don't know that those services are available to them. So making sure that they also have that information is going to be key. And lastly, building trust with your student community, being present, listen, and build rapport with them even before any decision is made, so that they feel comfortable enough to come to you with any questions. The next thing is career supports and postgraduate pathways. So TheDream.Us has been preparing for this as well. And one of the things that we have done is hire Nicole Wesley, my colleague who is here with us, And she is building out everything that deals with career supports programs. She actually has been doing a summer career series for our students, giving them information about how they can, through entrepreneurship, through creating their own business, through reaching out and working with other either organizations or students, they can actually find pathways to using their degrees post-graduation. So one of the things that I remember when I was in school and I was undocumented, I would ask, people would constantly ask me is, how are you going to school? Why don't you just go to work? Or why don't you quit school? Because you're not gonna be able to put your degree to use. And so there's this misconception that people that are undocumented shouldn't go to college because they don't have work authorization. And we need to make sure that we fight against that misinformation, because I know there's many people that before DACA were able to go into law school, were able to get into nursing, where I myself, did teaching degree. And I was able to put my degree to use in other ways, maybe not necessarily the traditional way. And so we want to make sure that students have the understanding that a college education is key and important for their lives, for their careers, for their communities, but also that there are other ways, and that it is going to be important in the future for them, even if it's, when we look at immigration reform, every single time there has been any legislation that deals with immigrant youth or dreamers, we also see that there's a college component to it or an education component to it. But at the same time, it's really important that we also build the resources that are needed in order for these students to thrive and succeed. So here's some of the things that we think it's going to be important. And so we want to make sure that you are aware of resources on alternative income, funding, and career pathways, and that in your institutions, there's opportunities for experiential learning, internships, and fellowships that are open to undergraduate and graduate students without work authorization. And again, if you go to the higher immigration portal, there are some great tools there. And TheDream.Us is working on making sure that we provide these informations. There are great pilots that we're doing right now. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please reach out to Nicole, and she can connect you and start providing with some resources and information we have on that. And so the last thing, I didn't put it as a pillar of support because I think it's a given, but it's really important that you use your voice. And so we all have a collective mission, which is to provide access to higher education to all. And undocumented students, for all purposes, are domestic students and deserve access to affordable education and opportunities to pursue their career aspirations, regardless of their immigration status. So your voice is going to be crucial in the legislative fight. Your students are going to need you. One of the things that I have seen, and in the history of this fight, I always tell the story of how Senator Orrin Hatch, who's a Republican or was a Republican from the state of Utah, he became aware of this issue because there was a student that had graduated as a valedictorian of her school. And doing that afforded her and allowed her to get a full ride into one of the institutions of higher education. Unfortunately, because she was an undocumented, they didn't know how to work and provide her this scholarship. So her high school teacher, along with the college that she wanted to go to, started lobbying the senator. And this is how he becomes aware in the late 90s, in the 2000s, about the issue of undocumented students. Similarly, this is how Senator Durbin in the state of Illinois became aware, and they came together with a common issue to create what we know today as the DREAM Act. So it was institutions of higher education, it was teachers, it was advocates like you all that made a difference, that brought this issue to the forefront, and have always been using your voice to say, how important it is for us to have some sort of legislative fix to ensure that the lives of all of our young people are able to be lived, and that they have opportunities to work and provide for their families and contribute to this country. So next week, we are going to be doing a session just for our scholars that have DACA. We also are inviting for those individuals that submitted a DACA application, but their DACA has been put on hold because of the judge's ruling. And we wanted to give this information out to you all so that you can also reiterate and voice what we are sharing with these scholars. And so there's three main messages that we are going to give to our scholars. The first message is renew, renew, renew. It is crucial that people renew their DACA as soon as they can. And so we're telling them that they should start preparing 6 months before it's set to expire. What does that mean? They should apply for funds. We do have a partnership with the Mission Asset Fund and have been providing supports of grants of the $495 fee. So they should start their application to receive this grant at the 6-month mark. They should also collect their paperwork and everything that they need in order to submit their renewal, fill out their forms, etc. And they should submit their documents 150 days to 120 days before it expires. The second thing we're telling individuals to do is to get an immigration check. And many people believe that because they went to see an attorney when they were young with their family, or that they've had already a consultation when they were doing their DACA paperwork with an attorney, that everything is the same. What we know is that actually from the 800,000 individuals that obtained DACA, there's a good chunk of them that were able to get status afterwards, and I'm actually one of them. So in 2017, I was able to get my green card because of a marriage petition. So I got married and I was able to submit an application for a green card and subsequently moved my status from having DACA to a green card. But there's so many other different possibilities. Many people that have DACA have never occurred what is called unlawful presence because they received DACA before the age of 18. And DACA has protected them from being able to get that. So that affords a lot of people opportunities to be able to get other forms of statuses or reliefs. There's also individuals that perhaps were victims of crime that might be eligible for what they call U visa. There's H-1B visas. There is also special juvenile visas. So there's a lot there that with a good immigration check with an attorney, that they can go through their history of what has happened since they got DACA or in their lives, that they might be able to actually get some sort of other status. So we are going to tell people that it's really key and important that they look for immigration service provider that understands the DACA piece for them to check to see if they have other immigration benefits. The third thing is, this one's a mixed bag for me because we don't necessarily know when the decision is going to come in, but we know the importance of traveling on advanced parole, especially for individuals that came through the country without inspection. So that means individuals that more than likely came through the border. And so individuals that came without inspection, it's difficult for them to be able to do their immigration paperwork stateside. So let's say for me, right, if I would have come through the border, then I wouldn't have been able, my process of my green card wouldn't have been able to be done here in the US. I would have had to leave the US, go to Ecuador, and wait for my visa there. And because I didn't have DACA after the age of 18 and occurred unlawful status, and I know I'm talking a lot of legal stuff, and you're like, what is this? But I'm just giving you some information so that it can be in the back of your head, and you can be like, hey, I heard something, I think you should get an immigration check. But the point is, because I had a legal entry, right? I was able to do all my paperwork here. If you don't have a legal entry, what happens is that when you travel on advanced parole, you cure that because you enter through an airport and or a port of inspection. And so we are going to tell students to look into the option of advanced parole, to try to do it as soon as possible, but not to wait, and to talk to an attorney first, because if they were to end the DACA program and they are outside of the country when that happens, it can be trouble for them. So we are going to talk to them about advanced parole, but are going to give them, in essence, a warning, right, that they should talk to an attorney to talk about potential risk of doing this. So the last thing that we're going to tell the students is I have prepared the 10 tips that are basic information of how people can prepare for life after DACA. So the first thing is we're going to tell students that they need to start saving money. And that's going to be crucial because if the DACA program ends, they're going to lose their work authorization, and it's going to take some time and buffer for them to figure out, what they're going to do if they lose their job, how they're going to find another job, etc. So we're going to tell students to start saving money. We're also going to tell them it's going to be really key and important for them to make sure that they know their key dates of their DACA process. You will not be surprised how many students are not tracking of when their DACA expires. We recently looked at this data, and there is not a big chunk, but there is a chunk of students that have not renewed their DACA yet. And it's really important that they do so. So it's key for us to remind them, hey, make sure you know your key dates. The other thing is to get other forms of ID. So while the work authorization card will expire and they will not be able to use that, it's really key that they see if they can get driver's licenses also are tied to their DACAs in many states, not in states like California. Recently, Massachusetts and Rhode Island passed in licenses for undocumented people. The higher education portal actually has state by state, you can see which states have that. But there are states like the state of Florida that if you lose your DACA or your DACA expires, your driver's license expires at the same time. So it's really key and important that we tell students to find other forms of IDs, like making sure that they have a passport from their country so that they will be able to continue at least doing certain things, like, for example, traveling within the United States, being able to enter certain buildings, be able to provide their identity with a document that is not expired. The other thing is learning their rights. There's a lot of things that are misconceptions around what rights immigrants have or not. So it's really important for them to understand and know what their rights are. And there's really good materials out there. If you just put know your rights, the famous red cards come out from the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, and we'll also provide that information to the students. The other thing is that many of the students actually own their own vehicles and have been able to buy homes. So we're going to tell them that it's important for them to plan ahead on how they're going to pay for these if they were to lose DACA and lose their job. The other thing is we're going to tell them if they have any medical emergencies or are dependent of medications, to work with their doctor to have a prescription of their medications and ask for a 3-month supply or more of the medications that they need if it's possible. if they have health insurance. So many of our students either have health insurance because of their work. Some of them might be because of their school, but to make appointments, to get annual checkups, to do everything they can to prepare in case that they won't have health insurance in the future. The other thing is to become acquainted with the immigrant rights organizations in their area, making sure that they know, the community and organizations that can provide support for them and their families. And here's the two that we want to hone in. We want to make sure that students are comfortable seeking mental health support if they're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and alone. And we want to acknowledge that this time is very difficult for them, but we also want them to know that we are with them, that there are thousands of people who are supporting them and are going to be fighting with them. So those are what we're going to present to them. Hopefully they'll give us, the hope is that this stirs a conversation and people start figuring out what other things they can do to prepare for a negative decision on the DACA program and the eventual end of the program. We do want to share with all of you that we're doing everything we can. We're working with other national organizations like the President's Alliance, the American Business Immigration Council, Dream.Us, et cetera, on trying to figure out what we can do on the federal level in Congress to pass some sort of legislation. And I'm also very proud to know that many of your institutions are part of the President's Alliance. And we recently did a fly-in in Washington, D.C., where we got to work with some of the college presidents, provosts, et cetera, of your institutions, to go to meetings on the Hill, to go to meetings with the Department of Homeland Security and with the White House, to really push this forward and say, we need to make sure that we have protections for our students. So with that, I'm going to pause now to make sure that we are able to take any questions that you may have. And you can either raise your hand, come off mute, put it on the chat, however you feel most comfortable. Yes, Catalina.
Hey there, everybody. Catalina Insunza from Grand Canyon University. I had a question for you, Gabby. I have a couple of students that have reached out to me to ask about DACA renewals, specifically because of the court case and the ruling that is coming up. Some of them have DACA that will expire in the first half of next year. However, they're still outside of that 150, 120-day window. So they've been asking me if they would run into any issues should they try to renew their DACA early. I think the idea is that they're hoping to at least get a little bit more of an extension into those like 2024 expiration dates instead of one for early next year. And so I'm not really sure how to advise them in that, if I should be saying, yes, just submit it and, they'll lose some on the back end, but they'll be able to extend their expiration date a little bit. But I just don't know if that's an appropriate thing to say, or I just don't know what the current guidelines are for that. I know typically it says between 150 to 120 days, but if they're outside the 150 days, what would you say?
So there's two things there. One, what you're saying is correct. But the two things is, one, if they're seeking funds, for example, through MAF, MAF won't release funds because they're going to wait until the 150, 120-day period. They'll give the funds if it's like maybe 6 months, knowing that it's going to take about a week or two for them to process and send out the checks. So the individuals kind of going to be on their own to try to find funding. Either they're going to have to self-fund it or see if there's any other organizations that are doing that. But the second thing is that it is uncertain if USCIS will process their application or they will hold it. So it really is them taking a risk of two things, right? That they're not going to have their application process because they're outside of their window of when they can renew. And the second thing, like you said, you know, the money can, it's not that the money's going to be lost, but they're not going to be able to have the support to be able to get those $495 from math, for example.
Thank you.
Oh, and the second thing that you mentioned is the back end, right? It's going to shorten the period of time of when they have their DACA.
Thank you.
You got it. Other questions or comments or something that you think we should make sure that we're also sharing with our scholars that you're going to be doing that you think will be important? Okay, so yeah, anybody? I thought I heard somebody come off mute. Okay. All right, so I hope this was helpful. I hope that, I know that the legal piece is a little messy, and if you're not an attorney or you're not really following some of these things, it's hard to understand. But I think the simple thing that we can tell the students is that the DACA program is going through a legal process. While there's hope that the DACA program will survive, reality is that with what we have been seeing in the Supreme Courts, what we've been seeing in the conservative courts, the likelihood of the program surviving is not high. And that even if it goes up to the Supreme Court, we are looking at some sort of decision probably by the end of next year. And so we really are looking at a sunsetting of this program sometime next year. The hope is that because there has been a precedent on reliance, that people rely on this program and that people paid for $195 to be able to have the work authorization, that the courts will allow for people to, in essence, sunset, right, the program. So people will be able to have their protections until 2023, 2024, whenever their DACA expires. And so that's why it's going to be really key and important that we push our scholars to be able to renew as soon as they can and to prepare, because as much as we believe in this program, as much as we know that this program is legal, we don't necessarily know how the courts are going to decide. And so it's really key that they start preparing for not having DACA, and for us as institutions and programs to prepare for supporting our students that would be fully undocumented. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be sending out the materials and the presentation in the PC Weekly. Take care, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.